Hi, Dave here from Pro Sport Physio, and I just want to have a look at Gabriel Selassie's running here. And Shane wrote a great article last week on energy links and how it's affecting your running. And he went into a bit of detail on how the rib cage and pelvis have to work together and the importance. And I just want to show you this actually running today. So we're picking Gabriel Selassie now. I've got a little bit of a soft spot for him as I got quite friendly when I worked in Ireland with Ger Hartman, who was actually his physio at the time, and Ger told me quite a few stories about him, and he used to go out, and he actually had a clinic over there, and he spent a lot of time over there. So we're going to pick him in his honour today. So what we're going to look at is when the foot hits the floor. So we're just going to pop this back a little bit. So as that left foot's going to hit the floor, the rib cage, okay, and the pelvis do actually opposites, okay? So as that foot everts and loads, we're just going to have a look here, okay, at the belt line, which is this black line here. You can see it's kind of slanted, okay, so the left hip is a little bit higher, which is absolutely fine. And then if we just look here at the shoulders, we can see there's a slight slant, not much, but there's a slant. You can see it more with the collar of the vest upwards, okay? So essentially you get this when the left foot hits the floor. Now I am exaggerating just for teaching purposes. You get that, okay? So one shoulder is higher than the other and one hip is higher than the other. So if we're looking from behind here, this left hip here, okay, is the one that's actually higher, okay? Now why that's important is that allows the left side to hit the floor and load like an elastic band, okay? So all this left leg here, this can load, take up the slack, okay? So it can transfer the energy effectively to the tendons. Now if the right side hip did not drop, then it would be a lot harder to get that load, okay, and taking up the slack on the left leg. Now why it's important that the right shoulder is slightly higher, okay, and the left shoulder comes down a slight bit, that creates a little bit of room for this right side, okay? Now this right side then gets a bit of a pre-stretch, okay? It takes up the slack for the right hip flexor, okay? So that right hip flexor now can then load also like an elastic band, okay, exactly the same as the left foot's loading, okay? So as that then explodes and the knee comes through, that's going to work in unison with the left foot exploding off. Now what we see in the clinic a lot is if somebody has a left-sided Achilles, now it can be right or can be left, okay, very often it can either be because they're not loading, so they're not getting that drop in the pelvis, or it can be because the rib cage isn't doing its job, which then doesn't allow the load to happen down this right side, okay? So it doesn't take up the slack well, it doesn't load like an elastic band and explode. So what has to give then is that left foot has to push off that little bit harder because the right leg isn't doing its job, okay? So all reasons you kind of have to go into it in a little bit more detail, obviously in the clinic, but this is only one part to get. Now there's 6 different parts that we've broken it down to through our training. Now if we look at the right foot, okay, now as the right foot, you can actually see that line. Just keep an eye on that black belt line, it reverses, okay, all very, very good. Now as his foot hits the floor and he everts, there we go, the opposite happens, okay? So the line now, that right hip is a little bit actually higher now, which is okay. And a lot of people will say, oh, that's a weakness of the glute med, which it's wrong because it has to happen naturally. Now excessive movement is weakness, don't get me wrong, or it's an inability to control the body weight. Now the right foot, the right hip's a little bit higher and the left shoulder is a little bit higher. Can you see that? So as the right foot hits the floor, we get the opposite. So we get the rib cage going down, or sorry, we get the pelvis going down, and we get the rib cage going up. Now I'm exaggerating this for teaching purposes. That's going to create the load, okay? So that's going to allow that load take up the slack, all those muscles on the right leg, and it's also going to allow room to take up the slack with the left hip flexor now as that leg's about to follow through, okay? So this knee here now can follow through and explode effortlessly. Okay, now if you don't take up that load effortlessly through the movements of the rib cage here, then the muscles they're not able to tap in and transfer the energy to the tendons, so therefore they have to work even more in a non-isometric fashion in terms of concentric contraction. Okay, so now nobody can use 100% elastic energy, but the more elastic energy we can tap into, the more effortless running becomes, and that's what all the London Marathon and our running packages are all about. They're just trying to get that elastic energy as high as possible so the muscles don't have to work as hard, which is why we say, our aim is to get you running effortlessly. So I hope that was useful for you. It's good now probably to go back, have a look at that article about energy leaks and running, and when Shane talks about the rib cage, you'll have something to kind of think about. So just to summarize, when the left foot hits the floor, the pelvis goes down as the rib cage goes up, and then as the right foot hits the floor, the pelvis comes down as the rib cage comes up. So essentially you end up getting that crisscross patterning every single step. Now that little bit of movement is fine. As I said, some people think it's a weakness, but actually it's gravity, and it's allowing the body in that frontal plane, that side to side plane, to take up the slack. So it's very, very important to running, and it's only one part of running that shows the importance of the rib cage and the pelvis working together for that every single step.